Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And I knew when I uploaded my review of Ultimate X-Men #1, that world was going to invite some backlash. Because unlike my other reviews following this new Ultimate Universe, which have been overwhelmingly positive for the most part, I did not hide my immense disappointment in this comic. Now, was I overly harsh in how I criticized Ultimate X-Men #1? In hindsight, yeah, I probably was. But do I stand by those criticisms? Yes, I do. Because, harsh as they might have been, I strongly believe the substance of my review was still valid. Ultimate X-Men #1 was an abysmal comic. Aside from Peach Momoko's distinct art style, it offered nothing of value to X-Men or this new Ultimate Universe. And if you hadn't read the title, you never would have known this comic was supposed to be about either. That, in my opinion, is a bad sign for what's supposed to be a major pillar of this new Marvel Universe. Now, while I don't care to recount all the comments and criticisms I got from my review, I will say they often boil down to shallow generalizations. It usually amounted to things like, it's only the first issue, you just hate it because it's different from other X-Men comics, or you're just bitter about the old Ultimate Universe. And for the record, every one of those remarks is pure, unprocessed bullshit. I know the people who made them probably won't believe me when I say that, but that's not my problem, nor is it my concern. Also, quick aside, Peach Momoko herself made a Facebook post shortly after the first issue came out. In it, she responded to some of the criticism the issue had received. She didn't give specifics, but I have a feeling I know what they entailed. And in that same post, she made a comment about what she thought the X-Men represented, and her take was incomplete if I'm being charitable. So even if my review was unfair, I know I'm not the only one with these sentiments. Also, that Facebook post was later deleted. All we have now are screenshots. Now, I don't want to read into that too much, but I'm bringing this up to make one thing clear. My criticisms of this book and this series are not intended to be personal attacks against Momoko or anyone else who worked on this series. My intent is to criticize the contents and substance of the book. That is all. Now, I'm sharing this backdrop of my review of the first issue of Ultimate X-Men because I had every intention of reviewing the second issue when it came out. Disappointed or not, I do want to give this series a fair shot at being better. One single bad issue should not define an entire series. But Ultimate X-Men #2 has a lot of heavy lifting to do, if it's even going to come close to what the other Ultimate titles have achieved. Now, the second issue starts with a brief but necessary reminder of where Hisako Ishiki is mentally and emotionally. The first issue followed her as she dealt with the lingering trauma of Tsubasa's death. He was her best friend, and he had been the target of bullies, albeit for reasons that weren't revealed. But in a flashback, Hisako realizes that there were signs. Him talking about dropping out of school might have only seemed rebellious at the time, but she didn't realize until it was too late how much it had been a cry for help. And the reappearance of the same shadow creature within this memory adds another potential link. Even so, it's still vague and lacking. That remains an underlying problem with this whole series. So many aspects are left unsaid. Nothing of greater substance is even really hinted at here. It's just a reminder of what Hisako is going through. And there's no real indication that this personal ordeal has anything to do with mutants, the X-Men, or the Ultimate Universe. And again, the title of this book is Ultimate X-Men. That still feels like a hell of an oversight. However, things in Ultimate X-Men #2 do pick up considerably once Maelstrom enters the picture. She's the one who catches up with Hisako while she's out being angsty and brooding. And remarkably, she's the one who helps change the tone of this book in a meaningful way. Now, I've stated in previous videos that the history of original characters in the Ultimate Universe is terrible, to put it kindly. With the lone exception of Miles Morales, pretty much every OC has been either entirely forgettable or so poorly developed that they just completely derail a series. As a result, I was very skeptical that Maelstrom, a character that Peach Momoko originally created as a potential sidekick for Storm, could finally be the one to buck that trend. But much to my surprise, she provides a much-needed shift for Ultimate X-Men #2. She initially identifies herself as May, and when she confronts Hisako, she's not looking to make friends or recruit her or anything. She just recognizes her from the car wreck that she triggered with her powers in the first issue. And in doing so, she reveals that she has powers too. She even demonstrates them by powering up a toy without batteries. Now again, the word mutant is never even uttered here, or throughout this entire comic. These powers could just as easily be the result of wizardry rather than mutation. But I promise I won't belabor that more than I already have. More than anything else though, Mei's demonstration proves that Isako isn't the only one suddenly manifesting superpowers. She also proves that these powers can be controlled and channeled. They don't need to just randomly happen when she's about to get hit by a car. That in and of itself makes Mei feel a lot more developed than Hisako. It also helps establish a level of trust, which Hisako badly needs right now. Because, just like the first issue, she got another mysterious note telling her to meet somewhere shady and secluded. And since Hisako seems incapable of learning from past mistakes, she heeds the note. But at least she takes Mei along with her. Now, I get that teenagers are dumb and prone to making bad decisions. But this is the second issue in a row in which Hisako has heeded a mysterious message in a handwritten note. Once is a mistake, but twice is a pattern, when that has already become painfully predictable. Thankfully, Mei does manage to make this more than another angst-ridden trip. She and Hisako actually have a decent conversation, and it doesn't just revolve around Hisako lamenting over her friend's death. Personality-wise, Mei actually sounds more like a real teenager, thinking superpowers are cool and Hisako is being too hard on yourself. And you know what? She's right. Mei actually manages to steer Hisako away from this brooding mindset she's been in since the first issue. It's the first hint that Hisako is even capable of more than one emotional state. It might have taken an extra nudge, but she was overdue, and she still needs a lot more nudges to be more compelling. And while I would have liked to see more interactions between these two, the more predictable aspects of this story eventually play out. Once again, they encounter the same shadow creature from the first issue, and what he says and does really isn't all that different. He goes on another diatribe about seeking revenge, just like before, and there are some added horror elements, but nothing else in terms of real substance. But with Mei present, there's a bit more variety in terms of how the fight actually plays out. She actually demonstrates some powers that are similar to that of Storm, but not nearly on the same scale as what we see in Ultimate Black Panther. But despite her best efforts, it really doesn't do much other than further enrage this shadow monster. But, once again, Hisako manages to beat it the exact same way she did in the first issue. That is to say, she didn't really beat it at all. Her powers just manifested when she needed them to, and won the fight for her. No effort, no training, nothing of the sort. At least Mei showed some agency in how she fought back. But with Hisako, it's basically just another repeat of the first issue, one that probably wouldn't have even changed the outcome if Mei hadn't been present. Now, if that sounds critical, that's because it is. Because it's one thing for Hisako to make the same dumb decision as before, but for this generic shadow creature to do the same thing and have it play out the same goddamn way? Again, that's just bad, unimaginative writing. But once it all plays out, we actually do get a clue as to who is behind these shadowy attacks. After Hisako's second contrived win in as many issues, we flash to someone who looks like a Japanese version of Shadow King's human form. Now, we still have no idea if this is Shadow King or someone else entirely different, but he's frustrated at failing yet again, despite using the exact same method as before, mind you. He seems to know Hisako's name, but that's pretty much all we know about him. Thus far, he's shown an incredible lack of imagination and skill, so he's really not all that menacing. And if he truly is this series' main villain, then he's already failed spectacularly at making an impression, or even demonstrating that he's worth taking seriously. All he really accomplishes is giving Hisako another reason to trust Mei. And when they do meet up at school the next day, the foundation of their new friendship is fully solidified. Mei is still the driving force. She effectively has to drag Hisako into being more than just a brooding, anxious mess. It amounts to some very small progress, but it is progress. And in the end, I'll go so far as to say that Mei is the only reason this issue is tolerable. But even with Mei, this new Ultimate X-Men series is still lacking in so many ways. 2 issues in, and there are no meaningful connections to the rest of the Ultimate Universe. There's not even a hint as to how mutants are perceived in this universe. But compared to what other Ultimate books have managed to do in that same span, Ultimate X-Men has no excuses. It just doesn't have the substance or the narrative to make it a competent X-Men story, let alone a decent Ultimate story. Maybe it could have worked as its own thing, but even then, this issue basically just repeats the same plot beats as the first. Aside from introducing Maystorm, it's just another empty, poorly written comic with pretty manga-style art. And it remains the least compelling series of this new Ultimate Universe. For the most part, I think it still sucked, just not as much as the first issue. Having put that out there, I'm sure I'll get plenty of the same criticisms in the comments for this review. But just like before, I ultimately stand by my criticisms of Ultimate X-Men #2. Thanks for watching, everyone, And thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, take care and stay safe.